Hi! In this video, I will attempt to explain the main points of David Hume's empiricism with Genshin Impact. Warning! This video is for myself to help me revise for today's philosophy exam. I'm not a Hume expert, and that's why you should take everything I say with a grain of salt. First of all, in order to understand Hume, we must know what empiricism means, since he was one of the biggest empiricists of history. Empiricism is a philosophical doctrine that denies any other knowledge source that isn't experience. In other words, it considers experience as the only way to obtain knowledge. This was a heavily debated topic throughout the history of philosophy. Great thinkers such as Plato argued that knowledge is independent from experience, since it is innate and a part of our souls. However, Hume was against that. Let's find out how and why. In the first book Hume published at the early age of 20, A Treatise on Human Nature, Hume asked himself what kind of contents exist in our mind. According to him, since every knowledge comes from our senses and the external world, all our mental contents are perceptions. We can classify perceptions into two categories: impressions and ideas. Impressions are those perceptions that present themselves with more force and clarity, such as the color yellow of Navia's hair. However, if I switch to another character and ask you to reminisce about that color yellow, you can't see it in your mind with the same clarity as when I showed you the color itself. These weaker perceptions are ideas. They're considered representations of perceptions. Within impressions, we can find two other categories: sensations, which are any kind of information we receive from the outside world, and reflections, which are our own reactions to the impressions. For example, I eat too many sweet madams and get sick. Sensation. Therefore, I feel regretful from having eaten too much. Reflection. I see the wee nut on Spiral Abyss floor 12. Sensation. And I feel dread. Reflection. Going back to ideas, they can be divided into simple ideas, which are a mere copy of an impression, and complex ideas, which are a group of simple ideas. In order to associate simple ideas to form complex ones, we follow three principles of association: resemblance, contiguity, and cause and effect, this last one being the most important one. After understanding the two types of perceptions, we can conclude that all ideas are copies of impressions. Impressions are clear and evident. Therefore, when we come across an idea that is stark and unclear, we must ask ourselves which impression it derives from. If we can't find any, then this idea will be invalid, without any cognitive value. This criteria to analyze the veracity of ideas is the copy principle. When we can't see clearly whether an idea leads to authentic knowledge, we must analyze the impression it derives from. In the case we can't demonstrate the impression it originates from, the idea will be considered a pseudo-idea and devoid of any cognitive value. This is how Hume dismisses ideas such as substance, essence, energy, force, soul, and God. Speaking of cognitive value, Hume thought that not all types of sciences contribute to knowledge in the same way. On one hand, sciences such as mathematics were relations of ideas. This type of knowledge doesn't reference the outside world and, in consequence, doesn't say anything about reality and is independent of experience. They can't be contradicted. A triangle has 3 angles and that's just a fact. If it had 4 angles, it would stop being a triangle. On the other hand, other fields such as natural sciences are matter of facts. In contrast to relations of ideas, they depend completely on experience. Therefore, according to Hume and other empiricists, it's what all knowledge about the world is based on. Unlike relations of ideas, the contrary is possible without falling into a contradiction. For example, if I attack an enemy, they will fight back. This is based on my previous experiences of fighting enemies and them being aggressive towards me. But nothing assures me that the opposite can happen. This leads me to one of the most important points of Hume's philosophy, the analysis of causation. Causation isn't something that we can perceive. When A happens, a cause, and it leads to B, an effect, we can perceive both A and B. However, we can't identify any necessary connection between the two of them. This might sound strange to us since we're used to seeing events occur in a way and we assume that it might keep occurring the same way in the future. For example, when every single day of my life I see the sun in the sky when I wake up in the morning, I will assume that tomorrow morning the sun will also be in the sky. Accordingly, we tend to establish connections between cause and effect. Hume thought that this connection didn't exist between the impressions of cause and effect but the ideas of them, because they only exist in our heads. In that case, how do these ideas link with each other? Hume considered the constant conjunction, which is a fancy term he used to describe every time that A happens, B happens. We only have impressions of A and B, but after seeing them adjacent to one another, we end up assuming a certain relation between the two. Just like how we learned that every time we apply pyro and geo shortly after, we obtain a pyrocrystallite shield. Our mind is affected by this tendency, and it's this tendency what gives us the idea of cause. Imagine you've never played Genshin before, or any video games for that matter. Would you be able to deduce that you can obtain a pyrocrystallite shield from applying pyro and geo consecutively on an enemy? It would be very unlikely without any previous experience. If this is true, then how is it possible to obtain scientific knowledge? If we consider that the relation between cause and effect is an operation of our mind and not a necessary connection, we can't have any certain knowledge, only probabilities. We will never know for sure that Newton's law of universal gravitation is true. We can only assume that it probably exists, since we have been noticing its effects since the beginnings of recorded history. And this is going to be everything for this video, since I'm running out of time. And I still have to edit this whole thing. Goodbye!